Okay, cool.
I am really, really excited to be talking with you today, Jason. You've got your brand new book out. Which number of book is this? Is this number 3?
5.
Number 5. Look at you, just killing it.
Well,
killing it.
I don't know if I'm killing it or if it's killing me. So
yeah. And are all these with Jason?
So Jonathan and I. So I wrote my first one. Yeah, no, it's all good. We both start with J, so it's like I can't tell you how many times this happens. But I did a first book really nobody's ever heard about, which is totally fine. Maybe nobody's heard about the other ones. I don't know. But the first one wasn't for the purpose of people buying it. It was actually for the purpose of me going through the discipline of writing.
Oh,
and I had heard some things about writing and I wanted to experience it. And I learned, don't edit while you write. There's some things that I learned. And then Jonathan and I started really book 2. We just finished, let's see, what's today? Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, we submitted book 6. It'll come out in July of 23. So it just works. It works with him. He's awesome. Just the way we work together.
Yeah.
Just the humility. I mean, he makes us better. So it's a real joy.
That's great. So tell everyone a little bit about your background and how you came to write a book about this subject matter.
So in the church world, most of the 25 years on church staffs, also working alongside churches, helping them to with their leadership development, with team development, that could be staff or volunteers. And then specifically related to this book, creating experiences that guests love. And I think for so long, we just expect people to show up, whereas you have all these companies, they invest money, they have these personas, they do certain things to attract people, and they do these things to keep people. And really what they're doing is they're building this culture that people feel they're a part of, that love, invite other people to come with them, hence the culture part. Because if we're just building tactics and these things that we can't sustain, that's not the idea. The idea is, what does it look like if internally we built a culture that our internal team loves and then the external team loves too, or the external individual or a guest?
That's huge. Now, who is the audience, the church, or is it broader than that? I think it's broader than that, but I wanted to just clarify for everyone listening.
Yeah, it's broader than that. In fact, I would say this book, more than any other book we've ever written, is written beyond the church.
Yeah.
Perfectly appropriate for the church.
Sure.
But it's the Ford by Horst, being in the hotel industry, Ritz-Carlton. So it's this idea of, hospitality, which feels antiquated. It's an industry, but long before it was an industry, it was actually a belief and a behavior. And so it's almost reclaiming an antiquated word and putting it into our modern cultures to watch how people respond positively, because people want to feel, and that's what hospitality is about.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in your most successful companies. It's the difference of going into an Apple store and into a Microsoft store. Even though Microsoft tries to makes their store try to look like an Apple store, there's an experience, because I think, like you said, culture. We know William, culture wins, and culture is such a. And if you're not focusing on that, and you're just focusing on your product, man, maybe that can work if you have a really fantastic product. But overall, I don't think that's gonna work, and really. It might work for a moment, but it's not that long-lasting glue, right?
There you go.
So interesting. You talk a little bit about the difference of calling everyone a guest versus a customer. Now, obviously, from the church world, that's easy. We're not going to call them customers.
Sure.
From the business world, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, some people say, so you're saying using the word customer is wrong, and it's like, no, I don't know that there's a right and a wrong. I think if you say the words, they feel different. So for me, that's where I begin. And the other thing is, the language that you use influences the behavior that you choose. And so
that's good right there.
If I use a certain language that I call people, and again, customer's not bad, but customer feels transactional,
Yeah,
whereas a
very transactional.
guest feels relational. Therefore, if that's the case, subconsciously, I behave to support whatever the word is, you know?
Yeah.
And so for me, that's the difference. It's not to knock the word customer. I have corporate clients, they use the word customer, and it's fine. I'm not going to change that animal. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I want us to think about is like, what are the behaviors that we want to demonstrate to that particular guest or customer,
right?
In order for them to feel something, and then in order for them to respond and remain engaged with us. So
that's good. I mean, even here at Vanderbloemen, we talk about serve, don't sell, and it's really that same kind of an idea of, it's your mentality, it's your focus. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to just close a transaction?
Yeah.
No, like here at Vanderbloemen, we're trying to solve people problems for faith-based organizations and help their teams thrive. So it's not just about them being a customer and getting our product or our service. It's really about this long-lasting relationship that you have. I mean, obviously, right, the best guest experience is Disney, right? People love Disney, and they go and they wouldn't even consider another park. I mean, Disney's where it's at for the Disney people. So you also talk about, and this is, I think this is such a big deal, and not just in working with your guests, things like, but just life in general, about being fully present. Talk to us a little bit about that a little bit more.
All right. So I was doing an interview recently, and somebody asked me this question, and it was, if you had one idea to pick out of the whole book, what would it be? And I'm like, ugh. And I actually, it would be this. It would be fully present, because it's what you just said, Michael, that this isn't the idea of being fully present. I didn't come up with, right? I'm not that brilliant, but it's more than just like doing it with a team or your guests, but it's like, what if you're fully present with your family? What if you're with your spouse, with your friends, with your parents, with, you know, your neighbor? Like, so this idea of being fully present is, if I choose to be fully present with you, I'm kind of holding up this megaphone, and I'm telling everybody and everything else, hey, I just want y'all to know that the most important person to me right now is the person in front of me. So that's what it's my body language. It's where I am mentally that the other person doesn't even necessarily know, but I'm having to kind of press pause on what I'm thinking to enable them to press play, and I'm actively listening and I'm responding. And I'm not necessarily there to solve everything for them. I am there to listen to them and to validate them. Because you know what, Michael, interestingly enough, and we see this more than ever before, people want to be seen in a way that makes them feel comfortable.
They do.
I cannot do that unless I'm fully present. So you know what? Don't listen to respond. Listen to understand. My wife, who's a therapist, she taught me this years ago. She says, Jason, there's a difference when you talk about the idea of being fully present, whether body language or spiritually fully present, you know, right? Like realizing God's put me in a spot to do something, or emotionally, you know, dispensing empathy. She says there's an idea of listening to and listening through. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And she says, listening to is listening to enough of what someone says to formulate a response. Listening through is listening through their words, their emotions, their body language, their questions behind the questions. You're listening through. And then at the end, maybe you need to respond, maybe you don't. Maybe the response is you were fully present and you listened to me. And I'm like, and I said, which one do I do? She goes, you don't want me to answer that question. The reality is it's hard. There's a great book. Her first name is Kate, but I think the title of it is called Are You Listening? And it's put out 2 or 3 years ago. But again, it's just an entire book on listening. I think, I'm no brilliant expert, but I think what people need most, what our kids need, what our spouses need, if you are a supervisor over, you know, 1 or 1,000 people, if you lead volunteers, listen, listen to them. And it's amazing what it does for them, but it's amazing what it does for the relationship.
It's funny. I read the book, Never Split the Difference, which is a fantastic book, FBI hostage negotiator. And, you know, so I'm reading it. My wife and I are sitting on the porch. She says something, and I go into the book and I use a piece of the book, and I'm like, oh, really? What? So it sounds like it's really important for you to da da da. And she's like, yeah, it is. And then I'm like, oh, yeah. So what you're saying is this, and she went, hold on, what's going on? You're really fully engaged. You're totally listening to me, and I'm like, you mean I don't know it?
Yeah.
It was so
Well,
funny.
Yeah. To
It makes a huge difference.
It does, and to make it practical, I do leadership development for first year leaders in a particular role for FedEx Ground, and one of the things that I work on with them are, in this context of being fully present, specifically listening, what are helpful phrases to say to people and unhelpful phrases that you want to avoid that could make them say, oh, you're not fully with me, you know? And so I think the idea of using phrases, like if we were to have a conversation and you were sharing a frustration, I might say something like, Michael, that actually sounds really difficult.
Right. Yeah.
And as simple as that is, it says, okay, you're listening. And two, these phrases are like bridges for the conversation to continue. But if we're not listening truly, we're not going to be able to say those phrases. We're like, oh man, that's a bummer. Or
because we're jumping to the next thing, right?
Or the famous one. This is the famous one. In fact, I just had an argument with my 17-year-old daughter yesterday. We're at college orientation. And she often says, I understand. And I hear adults use this all the time. And I think we might mean well when we say these phrases, but what the phrase says is it's actually not true, because you don't understand. You've never been in my situation. You've never felt what versus saying things like, I can see how you'd feel like that, you know? And again, all of that is driven to this listening and being fully present.
And that I always heard, it's funny. I can't tell you how many times, and it's always salespeople, and I'll introduce let's say it's a car, right? I'm buying a car, and I'm like, they're like, hi, I'm Joe. Hi, I'm Michael. And they'll say, oh, okay. So do you like Mike or Michael? Which is a funny question, first of all, because I just introduced myself as Michael, but that's fine. I'll say, yeah, usually Michael. And I swear 9 out of 10 times, and I'm probably even more than that, they're like, oh, okay. So Mike, what are you looking for today? Like, why do we just do that whole song and dance? It's so funny, but it is that whole be present, be about the person. I was just on a live call with Len Wilson the other day, and it's we have to be so much more about people. And I think, even to your point, it's also about bringing empathy. So not only do I hear you, but I feel you, and I may not understand, and I may not even agree, but man, that sounds like something you're really struggling with. That's something we're learning to say with our kids, and they're like, well, yeah, or that sounds like gives them really big emotions. They're like, well, yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, and when you think about, empathy is real. I'm trying to experience someone else's feelings. I'm not trying to solve it. I'm trying to experience, what is Michael feeling? And if you're not fully present, let's take it broader. Let's make this practical. So for the person working at a church, leading volunteers, wants to have a great guest experience. If your volunteers don't sense that you're fully present with them, it is going to be very difficult for them to want to be fully present with the guest, because the team reproduces what they experience, right?
Yeah.
And so,
that's good.
Are you fully present with your volunteer? Does that model for them being fully present with the guest? Like, what does that mean? What happens when you're not? So sometimes we learn from the opposite. But it really is, because people don't go, oh wow, Michael was fully present with me. They don't use language, but what they do is they use feeling words, or they sense something different. And really, that's one of the key things. That's what it is. And empathy is a massive part. That's why I always talk about leaders. Like, what would it look like for us to be dispensers of empathy?
Oh, I love that. I love that. You talk about 3 questions that bring you from being average or mediocre to excellent. Talk about that. And also, if you can, touch on how do you, because this is something I struggle with, how do you balance excellence and not going towards perfection?
Oh man, bro, that's this one's not that everything is personal in the book, but this one's personal, because let me be honest with you. And if you're listening today, let's just be real.
Yeah.
This is a struggle for me. This has been a struggle for me my whole life. that I have a self-inflicted burden of the idea of perfection. I don't even know what that looks like, but it is a pursuit. And sometimes it's an obsession. And sometimes I beat myself up about it. And sometimes, like if I just give a talk, or if I go to a church and preach, or if I write a book and I'm like, oh man, I did such and such, that wasn't perfect. And and I kind of beat myself up about it. And I don't know, maybe somebody listening today, you're like, okay, you too? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're in good company if you're listening today, and that is you. When I think about excellence, a former volunteer of mine, he was CEO of a company, and we got to talk about excellence one day because I always sensed he was so good at it.
Yeah.
And I said, like, talk to me about this. And he says, Jason, I do aim for perfection, even though I don't even know what it is, but I eventually land in excellence. Yeah. And I said, like, what does that mean? Horst Schulze talks about this. Different people talk about it. I think sometimes perfection doesn't exist. Right. And so I think trying to give ourselves some compassion about that. But what does exist is excellence. And excellence is not just an idea, but it's supported with behavioral choices that prioritize the person that communicates care.
Yeah.
So for example, if you're at a church, excellence from an aesthetic perspective, let's just even make it really simple: cleanliness.
Yeah.
Excellence would be, I'm walking down the hallway, I see a piece of trash, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to look down because like somebody else will get it. Excellence would be, that little piece of trash matters. I'm an owner. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to throw it away. Right. Or excellence is, if I have a meeting at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be on time at that meeting because that's a behavioral choice to be excellent. If we are working on things like preparation, that's excellence. And so a lot of times for me, I'm always like, what's working, what's not, what needs to be fixed. Maybe another way you could ask it is, what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, what's confusing, because in these questions surfaces things that, man, we are really doing that well. And then it shows up over here like, wow, there's some ambiguity there, or why are we even doing that? And the church is notorious for adding and adding and adding and adding. And I think sometimes what we do in adding, we get complexity. When we get complexity, we get ambiguity, versus what would it look like for us to actually subtract? And maybe go about clarity that way. So excellence is, it's a mindset that then is delivered in a behavior, and we have to model that. And that plays out in a lot of different ways, from if we hand out a bulletin at our church, the paper we choose, the way that it looks. I mean, I know you're a creative, and it's like, wow, okay, I think somebody's 4-year-old kid made that. And some people have said to me, well, that stuff doesn't matter. And that is not excellent thinking. Everything communicates. And since everything communicates, everything deserves to be excellent. So you could take it spiritually or not spiritually. Spiritually speaking, God is entrusting us to represent him well. Representing him well would be to be excellent. If you take a spiritual side, when you do things in an excellent manner, what it communicates to the person that is receiving whatever it is you're saying or doing, you're thoughtful, you're intentional, you're caring, and it feels like, they're doing the very best that they can, and this is the way it should be. That's good. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the truth is, I tell my team here, everything is marketing, right? Everything we do is marketing and brand and things of that sort. And so the truth is, even in your example, if it doesn't, well, no, that's fine, it doesn't matter, then don't waste time on it. Just waste time on the things that matter and the things that you're good at. And in the spiritual context, the things that God's called you to. Because if he's not called you to it, then why are you doing it? Why are you spending any time and emotion and energy in those areas? Many are ideas and plans in a man's heart, but it's God's way that prevails. So spend your time in that kind of a thing, and be excellent in it, and be be aware. And again, what I love about this entire concept, and where I'm seeing a bigger focus in our world today, I think is especially coming through what we all just came through over the last couple of years. We're seeing each other more. We're recognizing that we want to be seen, but we're also recognizing that you want to be seen. And it's much more about people now than maybe projects or, you know, our agendas. And I love that. So it's interesting. When I first look at the book, it's about how to have, you know, great customer service and great guest experience, but I think it's so much deeper than that. So I think it's I'm really excited for people to get into this book and get their hands on it. Tell people how they what's the best way to get hold of the book.
Yeah, you said something that's interesting, and I would agree with you. You won't find this phrase in the book. I don't even know that I really use this phrase often, but I hope I hope that the book helps people understand people.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's elementary, but because we're humans, we sometimes focus on ourselves, and because we're humans, I think we have, over the number of years, we've increased our addiction to motion. Sometimes what we can do is we can overlook just the basic human needs of the person that is next to us. And for me, that's why I revisit this idea of hospitality, because for me, hospitality is intentionally showing generous care to another person. And there's some key words in that: intentionally, generous, and care, right? And so if we could do that, you know, more often, that again, in your home, with your neighbor, at the pool that you hang out with, and, you know, maybe your neighborhood, at your church, whatever it might look like, in your company. So they can they could go to the comebackculture.com and check out the book there. Catchfiredaily.com is my particular website. There's other books there, and there's some resources, free resources on that website as well.
Awesome. And we'll of course put the links in on the website and all that kind of stuff as well. So, man, Jason, thank you so much for taking the time, and truly thank you for you and Jonathan writing this book, and for everyone that's listening and watching, get a hold of this book, whether you read it, whether you listen to it, get a hold of this book, and truly get to a place where you can live a life that says, how can I make other people's lives better? I think your life will become better because of it. Thanks, Jason. So good to see you.
Thanks, Michael. You too, buddy.